Hello, hello. This is the first game I've ever speedrun and my third finished attempt. I'm quite proud of this route in my play here. There's almost no downtime at the start of this run, so I'm going to cover the basics now. Anode Heart is like Pokemon or Digimon, and this is the card game spin-off, Layer Null. It looks like the Pokemon card game, it's a lot more complex. I'm going to use the terminology from Magic the Gathering to explain the basics here. Every card has an element, and if it requires or generate energy, it'll usually be of that element. Tama are your creatures. They have a toughness and a power in that order, and damage stays between rounds. They all have a creature type, an element, and a level from 1 to 3. Levels 2 and 3 Tama must be played over a Tama of 1 level lower, except for each level 3 Tama has exactly one level 1 Tama that it can evolve directly from. When we're talking about evolution, the only thing that matters is the element. The creature type does not matter. Apps are non-creature spells. They work at so anything that works at sorcery speed, enchantments, sorceries, whatever. They take an action just like Tama do, and more on that in a moment. Patches and viruses are your instants. They're always played in response to something. A lot of them are cancels, and that's a very important part of this game. The most unique part of this game is how turns and phases work. There's 3 phases in a round. There's the main phase, the firewall phase, and then the combat phase. Uh, you on your turn you have 2 actions, and then it'll be your opponent's turn, and this keeps on happening until somebody passes both actions. When that happens, the next phase will begin. So the firewall phase, some Tama based on their bonuses will gain stats, and then the person with the most energy draws a card, and then the firewall will be up until somebody passes both actions again. The firewall will prevent you from interacting with the opposing Tama, so it's safer to play behind the firewall. And then when somebody passes again, the firewall goes down and combat begins. Combat is simultaneous. All Tama swing from left to right. Leftover damage spills over. Damage that spills over your last Tama reduces your health by 1, regardless of how much the damage was. If your health hits 0, you lose. There's a lot more to it, but that's going to be enough to start this run. So the first thing I do is flash the settings. Enemy player intelligence is set at 6. This is the highest it can go. It creates some very difficult fights, and enemies are better at responding to what you're actually doing with your deck. The first thing that's going to happen is we're going to go into this card shop because we're dragged in there. This is where tutorials are. We don't like tutorials, they're slow, but we need to pick our name, and mashing in this game is both mouse buttons and space. One is yes, one is no, so hopefully if I'm need to answer a specific way, I'm mashing the right button at the right time. There's a fire deck here that we're getting, and then it's like a starter deck, it's not even 40 cards. And then we're getting a couple of chests here, and then we're going to go back in the card shop and get the only fire booster pack in this area. So I have to talk about pack RNG. When you open a pack, it will give you, if it's an A pack like this one is, 6 cards, and one of them is going to be rare. And the contents of the pack are determined when you open it, so you can save scum it. So here I'm going to save scum until I get something called a Fire Fan, which is thankfully a common card. I got it in one shot. That is not very likely. So here I'm going to build a shoddy fire deck, adding another 20 cards to this deck and removing a couple. So Fire Fan is a card I'm going to craft another copy of with bits. Bits in this game are the currency. It works like if you've played Hearthstone, the way you crush cards into dust and then use the dust to craft other cards. I also craft 3 more copies of this little dragon. This little dragon is a searcher. Every element has a searcher. It will require a discard to play, and then it finds an app from your deck of that element. So that one dragon, which happens to have 1 HP, finds a fire app. Fire Fan is a fire app that only works on Fire Tama with 1 HP, which is perfect because that's what our searcher is. What Fire Fan does is add +4/+4 to a Tama, which is a huge amount of stats this early. And it's going to be the foundation of how I make it through this area. This is cheater. There's 1 cheater in every area. They have special conditions. These are usually like more puzzly decks. This one is a BB cheater. He gives us a max BB if we beat him, and we need that for our deck. So this is an optional fight that we have to take if we want to make the deck I make. And so I'm already thinking of surrendering. And surrendering is a really big skill in this game, because surrendering, if you're going to lose, is a heck of a lot faster than waiting to actually see whether you lose. And the way native decks tend to work is they put a lot of power, not power, HP on the board. They'll get some power, but it's mostly HP. And then they rely on the bonuses that happen when the firewall comes up to kind of overwhelm their opponent. They like to build wide boards. And so in this situation, all of the HP and the BBs, which give even more HP, is probably too much for me to handle already, and it's not going to get any better. So I surrender. So I'm fighting him again. This is already kind of slow, but thankfully this is a best of one. And if I surrender fast enough, I'm kind of okay with it. So I played those 2 Tama and I got 2 energy. Energy is to the right of my cards. And I also have these discs, which also generate an energy. The difference is the discs will generate an energy every turn. They're kind of like lands. Energy does stay between rounds, by the way. It doesn't go away unless you spend it, which is kind of helpful. Which means I've gotten way more energy than I need, and that's very bad. Because I don't have Tama while my opponent is playing a crap load of Tama, and this is going to be another surrender. I'm drawing cards because I have the most energy. It doesn't matter. And sometimes that happens with a deck like this, where the energy generation is split off like that. Fire generates a lot of its energy actually from, not from those lands, but from hurting their opponent's stuff. Fire Fan, by the way, does require 1 energy. That's the reason I have any energy generation at all in this deck. So it gives me an energy back. I only need 1 energy to start Fire Fanning, but I do need that energy. So fire can have problems with energy generation most of the time, because a lot of times they'll not be able to target anything, or they'll only get energy if their fire spells actually kill their target rather than not cast. I think there's fire decks that work by burning their own stuff down instead of affecting their opponent's stuff, which I feel is both very fitting and very funny. But I don't have one of those decks. So the reason to build around Fire Fan is to keep my energy requirements low, which makes this deck a lot more consistent than it would otherwise be. It does help that Native doesn't have a way, or doesn't have many ways to interact with opposing creatures, unlike in this Shadowed deck, because it's a fire deck. The Shadowed are the main antagonists of the game. We'll see them several times. Almost always they will be running fire decks. And so you will see me playing behind the firewall almost every time I face a Shadowed, as much as possible. Because if I don't have the firewall up, chances are they can kill anything I play, and that can be very bad for me. But here, we've got both Fire Fans out. This is why I do this. This is what the deck is about. It's just putting out more stats on the board than my opponent can deal with. That Flaming Larvae draws a card after it's played, which is helpful. I had my own, but I didn't play it because passing to get the firewall up and getting to combat faster works for me because I have more stats on the board. That's a lot of this game is tempo through passing. I get a Cascade card here, we'll see it eventually. It'll also hurt me a couple of times when other trainers use them. And then we face Clara. Clara is the head of, or the boss of the native area. Each area has their own boss. It'll be a best of 3, and they tend to have reasonably strong decks of their element. So this particular deck has the Max Tanuki, which is like a 4/6, 6/4 creature with block. It's very big. And this deck can also revive that Tanuki. It even has a Tama that will revive that Tanuki. There it is right there. It's a 5/4. And like, the difficulty with this fight, because it's also a major reset point, is that if Clara draws that Tanuki, which also draws her 2 cards, she's almost always going to play it. And if she can revive it, she will always revive it. And so I can feel like I'm almost got the game won, and then like this level 2 Tama revives the Tanuki. Or she plays a Tanuki out of nowhere and then refills her hand, and she's got a lot of stats on the board. And it just wastes a lot of time, especially in a best of 3. If like she high rolls 2 games and then you end up going, you know, 5 to 6 minutes down, if not longer, because you know you had to fight the first battle and then you won. Usually, if things go poorly against Clara, it's just a reset. It's not worth it. It takes a lot of time. What you can do against a lot of nature decks like this is just try to keep all of their Tama off the board. Just kill them when they come out. If you can keep their Tama really light, nature is not very good. And here, I mean, I have Fire Fan. This is almost guaranteed to just be a win. Sometimes the opponent will even surrender in this situation. Unfortunately, for her, even the Porin doesn't save her. Porin are great, but they don't always stall as much as they want. So that is our first star. We are now going to go to Steve. We're going to grab pack next to him. We're going to fight Steve a bunch of times. Steve is not nearly as hard as anyone else we've been fighting, and he gives us 2 nature packs when we beat him, which is great. Steve can still have some really strong rollouts. It's just rare. He even has a level 3 Tama that's a 10-10 that has Protect, and if I see it, I immediately surrender because it is not worth trying to beat. But most of the time here, he's just going to die to Fire Fan. And I'm going to beat him, I think, 5 times, because the deck I'm going to be building is a nature deck, and it's my baby. I've been playing it for dozens of hours at this point, and it plays more like a Yu-Gi-Oh deck than a normal deck, in that a lot of the pieces just find each other, and it looks to make the same board state every time, and that board state is pretty powerful. So the deck I'll be building takes advantage of the other thing that nature does well, which is reviving. And reviving is usually kind of strong, but a little slow. The reason for that is you can't revive level 2 or higher Tama unless they were played to the field. So if you discard them, or if you mill them from your deck, they can't be revived. And a lot of your stats normally come from these higher level Tama. So if you can't revive them until they're played, it takes you a while to get the big stats on the board. However, max Tama in this game are level 1 Tama that have the stats of level 2 Tama. And the downside is that they require a lot of energy to play relative to their stats. However, we don't care about that because I'm going to be reviving them instead of playing them. So all I need to do is get these Tama in the discard pile. If they're in my discard pile, I can revive them for free, and I can just put a bunch of stats on the board. And that's what the deck I'm going to build does consistently and frequently. I'm just going to revive these Tama over and over and over and over again until I win. And the other thing that helps this is the nature terrain. So terrain in this game are app cards that work like, if you've played Yu-Gi-Oh, they work like field spells. Each player can have a terrain in play, and it does something when it's like a passive that either like it gives you something when you do a thing, or it affects the board in some way. Like I just played the Scorching Sands terrain here, and when the Scorching Sands terrain is in play, non-fire Tama are going to take a damage whenever they're played. Not that it matters here because Steve got a really big board. But we see it again here, and it's going to be much more effective here. Especially earlier opponents, like even on Intelligence 6, don't know how to deal with terrain and will often misplay into it. So the nature terrain that I'll be playing draws a card every time a creature is revived. So every time I revive a creature, I'll draw a card, which is great because it's what I'm doing anyway. And the like loop of the deck is hopefully to use my searches to discard at least 2 big creatures into my discard pile. And then from there, I run back in because I want 2 more packs before I actually start opening stuff. 2 big creatures in my discard pile, Binary Forest in play as my terrain, and then Miracle, which will revive 2 random native Tama, which is going to be the 2 big creatures. And then if I can revive more, that's great, but that's just going to be like the baseline of, okay, if I do that, and I do that every time, I should be able to beat most of my opponents within a couple of rounds. And I've just found a deck that does that very, very consistently. This, by the way, is just completely miserable without Fire Fan. Like, this Tanuki is annoying, but Fire Fan lets us easily overcome it with stats. So we finally gotten enough native packs for me to feel comfortable. So I'm going to leave the zone. I'm going to try to open them. I'm going to see if I get my deck. This chicken here is random. If you played 100%, it would suck because you need to find this chicken a bunch of times. We don't have to worry about that. So here I'm checking the album to see if I got the stuff I need. I got 4 of both of the rare cards that go in this deck, so I'm pretty happy with that. I want as much of this deck as possible when I open packs, and I've got almost all of it already. There's some cards that I need to wait for, but I'll be replacing them with native energy right now, which hopefully won't bite me in the butt because it doesn't go with my deck, but I can sometimes play stuff straight up, even though it's really expensive. So the Faw that I just added, that Sleeping Little Wolf, is the glue of my deck. It is what everything runs off of. Faw find apps, they're the searcher. They require a discard, which means by finding something with it, I will be tossing bigger creatures into the graveyard, and then being able to revive them with the revive apps I search for. They'll also get me the terrain. I will usually be playing 2 of them very early, if I'm missing a piece. There's also this native call that is at the end of this deck right now. That requires you to discard a card, which is great, and then it finds any native Tama. If I don't have 2 big native Tama, I'll sometimes use that, discard a big native Tama, get a second one, and then use the Faw to actually find the things I need. Knowing how to take any given hand and turn it into the thing, the board state I want, is a challenge. It's something that takes a lot of work. Here, I'm going to open these starter packs. I am then going to check the album for a specific card, which I did not get here. It's on the second page, left side, middle row. It looks like a target. I need that card. And this is like the most starter packs I'll be getting for a while, so I may as well just try to find it now so I remember and I don't miss it. I found it, good, I have the target, I'm happy. So now we're gonna run and fight the boss of the water area. Water is blue. It's the control deck. It's this particular version of it that he's running likes to take your energy away, which is funny because we don't use any. It also likes to summon a bunch of beach balls to your board, which are useless, and they just absorb damage and then they go back to him. One way to beat this deck that's very effective, because he does that, is to have some level 2 water Tama, because the beach balls that are summoned are level 1 water Tama, and you can evolve from them. So if you go that route, he's just giving you free level 1 Tama to evolve off of, which is very funny. A lot of this game's like that. It's a little puzzly. If you want to break a particular enemy, you can find a way to do it. And it's usually going to be very effective and feel very rewarding. I really like that about this game casually, but it's not that good speedrun wise because it takes too long to get the cards we need. We don't have time to farm. I only want to kill. My goal is to kill. I am very bloodthirsty. And this deck kills very quickly, and I don't need to farm anymore. The only farming I'll have to do the entire run is the farming I just did. Other than that, I don't need to get cards from packs that I'm not already going to get. So here is the Akahari, the tree-looking dudes. They don't have stats as high as any of the other cards I'm playing. The one thing they do, other than costing just 1 native energy, which is sometimes useful here, is they'll do 2 damage to an enemy and break protect. That ability is a triggered ability. You see the gear in the middle of them and the max BB. I may as well talk about abilities now. This is a good time to do it. So there's 3 broad types of categories that Tama abilities fall into. There's on summon, which happens when the creature is summoned from your hand, and specifically and only from your hand. Or through an effect that directly says summon. That triggers usually just once when they come into play. There's on delete effects, which happen when a Tama is deleted from the field, discarded from your hand, or milled from your deck. All of those work for on delete. The last one is triggered abilities. Triggered abilities can be used once per round. They sometimes have an energy cost. They're actually apps that go into the discard. They're just like linked to a specific Tama. Some triggered abilities are very strong, some of them kind of don't matter. There's some weirder abilities, but that's most of them. There's not a lot of passes in this game, but the passes that exist that like affect the whole board are very powerful. And I'll talk about them when they come up. This is the Earth area. Earth is very good at passive energy generation. Earth is very solid, very stable, a little slow, but just really strong in terms of being able to stay in the fight, stay on the board, etc. The unique mechanics that it deals with, it has a lot of block. The Max Tanuki has block, it's that gray shield on it. Block prevents trample damage. So damage that would normally spill over a creature with block does not spill over. So the decoy cat he just summoned also has block. So if something does 15 damage to a creature with block, that creature dies, but the damage doesn't spill over. It just gets reduced to 0 after that. Protect is a very different mechanic that often combines with block in ways that really annoy everybody. Protect is a golden shield. It is a specific like effect that has to be applied to a creature, although there's a creature called a Moai that does that on summon. Protect is very annoying because it invalidates all damage. The creature doesn't take any damage at all, and it if it has block and protect, it blanks the entire turn. It doesn't take any damage, no damage spills over, combat doesn't matter, it's just over. Protect only lasts for 1 round, but there is a creature called a Scarrick that the boss likes to play that will apply Protect at the low cost of 1 Earth energy. If it applies it to something that doesn't have block, it's probably easier just to spill damage over and not care about it. But if it applies Protect to something with block, you either have to kill the Scarrick or break the block. Preferably both. We don't want Scarricks to stay in play for very long. It's not fun to be in a situation where I don't have like this these Tanukis that on summon would be dazed. They don't do combat, but on revive doesn't matter. But more importantly, they have a triggered ability that hits something for 4 damage. If I don't have those Tanukis or the Yakahara in play, and I'm facing a Scarix, sometimes the AI will just decide to constantly protect something and I can't do anything about it. And it wastes a ton of time. So I'm very glad to have the Yakihara in this deck, just in case a Scarix decides to start getting, doing silly things and I need to do something about it. But now we've beaten the Shadowed again, and we're gonna just run out. I think no, I do not. I don't have to open anything here. There is a particular Earth card I'm looking for this native deck called a Moai. I mentioned them already. They have block and they protect themselves when they come into play. The reason I love them for this native deck is they require you to discard a card, which is something I want to do anyway. So they can blank an opponent's turn and they make my game plan better because they put the big things I want into the discard. They would suck to revive, but they aren't native Tama, they're Earth Tama, so they don't even accidentally get revived when I use Miracle. They're just great to have. Here, Native Call gets me a big thing, and then I can use Native Call to discard it to get another big thing. And then I'm going to use the Thaw to discard that other big thing, and it's all going to be good. Here, I actually don't do that because I see a Scarix, and I'm already really uncomfortable about that. I'm trying to find a way to deal with that. I really probably should have native called into a Tanuki Terror and then discarded it with the Thaw, rather than done what I did there, but it worked out. So this block creature, this is also a creature with fly, which I'm not going to talk about right now. It's, I think, the only creature you could see with fly before you get to the wind area. Other than, there's actually level 3 fire Tama that are like that. Other effects that Earth has. Armor is a very important function in Earth because the Earth Tama that you get the DNA for, which we don't do, but you can, gives you shards when you gain armor. So 20 Earth energy is unreal. Shards are next to the shop button that's above energy for me. My opponent also gains shards. My opponent's shard gain is way more important than mine for a long time. Every deck we're going to face generally has a way to gain shards that's specific to the Tama in that area. So the Kaboo, which is the Tama in this area, if you add his DNA to your deck, and your deck can only have one type of Tama DNA attached to it, would give you an Earth energy at the start of the game, and would give you a shard every time you gained armor. You can spend those shards at any time. They're actions. And they are not app cards, so it's unlike creatures, they don't put anything into your discard. 3 shards will gain you a life, 4 shards will discard your hand and draw 3 cards, and 5 shards will do a direct damage to your opponent. We will eventually be using shards to great advantage, but not now. I forget that I picked this anti-patch. I would have saved myself a lot of trouble if I remembered that I had that anti-patch at any point in this run. I do a little trick here where I exit zone first to get to this guy faster, instead of like running through the whole zone to talk to him. Before I did some grinding here, and I like bounced back and forth to do the grinding faster. So we have the 3 stars we need, and we're now going to go talk to Patch. Talk to Patch eventually. We're gonna talk to the person at the desk here, which is normally where we'd be fighting the boss, but apparently they're not present, so we have to go fight Patch at the card shop instead. Patch is using a Rainbow Gate deck. Rainbow Gate requires one of 4 different types of energy, specifically and only native, fire, water, and earth. If you have at least one of each of those energies. You spend all 4 to cast Native Gate. Native Gate cannot be canceled, and if you don't lose the game that round, you instead win the game. So it's a way of kind of like assembling Exodia. Not quite, but it works in a similar way. Patch's deck tries to play all Tama that either draw cards or generate energy on delete. And the way you're supposed to beat this deck is to either play a water deck that drains his energy, or play a specific Earth level 2 Tama called a Scarabray, which disables all passive effects of Tama, including on delete effects. The Scarabray in particular makes Patch's AI change a little bit, and he stops trying so hard, because basically if he can't crack Scarabray, he just loses. I almost forget to talk to the secretary here. I'm glad I ran back in, because that would have wasted a bunch of time. The chicken's still here. Usually the chicken moves randomly after you see it or fight it. So I was surprised to see it again, but we're not doing that this run. So here we're fighting Vixee before we fight Patch. Vixee is using a neutral Tama deck that generates a ton of shards because she has the Vixee Tama, which gives her a shard every time a neutral Tama is summoned. She is hard-coded to only use those to draw. If she would instead use them to do direct damage to us, this deck would be significantly more difficult to fight. But that's not how she's coded to be. This deck gains a lot of shards, and this was something that I realized at some point I'm going to take advantage of much further down this run. But for now, we just need to put more stats on the board than this deck that keeps summoning neutral Tama and drawing a bunch of cards until we win. And thankfully, we have the big Tama that gain all the bonuses when they stay out. My Max Tanuki got dazed there, so it didn't participate in combat. It's pretty rare for a deck to use status effects unless it's a bug deck, which we'll talk about when we get there. But dazed is really annoying when it hits my stuff, because not participating in combat sucks. So this is Patch. I would try, if I weren't playing this deck, because this deck just has a bunch of power anyway, to like not kill his stuff until I have the right setup. Here the right setup is just a ton of power on the board. I'm going to play this a little slow because it's really important that I maximize my turns here. If you give Patch enough time, he will just win the game. And the last thing I want to do is lose what is a relatively slow series of fights in a best of 3. Because if you don't beat Patch, if you surrender or lose to him, you have to fight Vixee again. And that's like even more time loss. And this deck is not runs into the problem that a lot of imperfect Rainbow Gate decks run into, which is it's going to possibly get 3 of the 4 types of energy and not be able to find the 4th. But I don't want to run the risk. He also has Cascade. I think he only has 1 in his deck, so the fact that I got hit by that made me a little irritated. It was not fun. Thankfully I have ways to recover here, because otherwise it would be really brutal. But here we'll just get a bunch of creatures out. We'll try to kill him. This is his 3rd of 4 energy, but he dies, so we're fine. He also, because of the way this deck is designed, needs to have a turn after he gets his 4th energy, which a good competitive Rainbow deck would never do. They would find other ways to make this work. However, as good as Rainbow Gate seems to be, like, uncounterable is pretty insane. There are some really funny ways to deal with it. In particular, there's cards that we don't have access to yet that have a downside of giving your opponent an energy. This is not a downside if you're fighting a Rainbow Gate deck. You can have exactly 4 types of energy, and if you ever get any type of energy, that slot is locked into that type of energy for the rest of the game. So if you give a Rainbow Gate deck a virtual energy, they can't Rainbow Gate anymore. It's kind of neat and also very amusing that a deck that seems this strong, that combos as hard as this does, that is relatively uninteractive, can be completely bricked by an incidental effect of a card that's supposed to be a positive. Like, giving your opponent energy is supposed to help them, but in a Rainbow Gate deck, it ends up, like, making their strategy fail. And one thing I really like about this game, by the way, this is him getting enough to Rainbow Gate, and now I just need to make sure he dies this round. A lot of the cards that... a lot of the decks that are strong are countered by cards that are good anyway. So you don't have to always like predict all of the strategies in the meta. You kind of build the best deck you can and have just some weird tech cards that end up helping you deal with a bunch of strategies that you might end up facing and would otherwise be very difficult. Of course, the counter to this is for those decks to have like enough of their counter cards and such to make sure that you don't mess with their strategy. But it's a very back and forth that I really like, and you don't see much of that in this because we're just trying to make really broken decks that go very fast and don't interact with our opponent much at all. We're in the fire area now. I already talked about what fire does, but there's a couple of things that happen here that were not experienced earlier. This is our rival, Riley. We fight them twice. This is a deck that introduces the idea that, hey, you can play cards from another element, and sometimes it's great. There's a fire caller, there's a fire bunny that this deck plays that is normally 2 energy, but if there's a native Tama in play, it's 0 energy. And it turns out it can also just be your native Tama that does that. And so this deck kind of shows you that that exists and how powerful native seed can be. It puts protect on itself when it comes into play and then hatches into a level 2 Tama. It only has 1 HP and it doesn't have block, so it's not the worst. It is kind of annoying how much something with 1 HP and protect like reduces how much damage you do overall, especially when have only 1 attack. But we eventually power our way through this. All of these Porin are so annoying. They all draw cards when they die. They gain 2 HP during bonus. But we eventually chop our way through this. Having the Tanuki to do 4 damage there is nice too. The things that have been introduced, or that are introduced in this area that have not been in prior areas. There's an enemy here that gives you a card called Bit Drilling. Bit Drilling discards the top 3 cards of your deck, like your opponent's deck, when you use it, and will give you a shard for every Tama that is discarded. We love it when opponents Bit Drill us, because it puts stuff in discard, which is where I need it to be in order to revive it. So they're just helping my strategy out, and that's also why you don't see it a lot outside of this area, because a lot of decks thrive off of having their cards deleted. I have to fight this optional and another optional because I'm not level 15 yet, and the boss of the fire area requires me to be level 15. The other thing that happens in this area that's new is there's going to be an app card that the boss plays that looks like a box with fire coming out of it. It's a card that reduces the fire cost of Tama. I think the all energy cost actually of Fire Tama specifically in his hand by 2. We really don't want to see that card because level 3 Fire Tama are terrifying. He also has a card that I'd never seen prior to this fight, in this run, called Eruption, which is the chase card. It's the prime card in the fire area, and it'll do 4 damage to all of your Tama. And by all I mean every Tama you have on the field and in your hand. So it just like destroys everything you have. And I got to see it this game. I didn't even know, or this run, I didn't even know that deck had that card. But for now, we're just fighting a couple of, I wouldn't call them grunts because that's kind of mean, but they're, you know, they're minions, they're chaff. We just need to get through this. It's also interesting that I couldn't fight the bit drilling guy twice. Steve is, from the native area, was an example of somebody that you can farm repeatedly. There's usually one of those in every area, but not always. I don't think any of these fire guys let you repeatedly fight them. So like you have to like fight, I think, like all 3 of them or 2 of them and then the boss, and then they'll be able to be refought. It can be kind of annoying if you're trying to farm them. Thankfully, if you were trying to go for bit drilling, you just need 1 and then you can craft it with bits, which is fine. That Miney, by the way, the TNT thing, if that's deleted, it does 2 damage to a random enemy Tama. So even if I had tried to use summon cancel on that, it would have still killed me. I like to save the summon cancel for level 2s here, because level 2 Tama are not the greatest to be facing here. Every cancel, what the cancel gives the opponent, in the case of summon cancel, it's a card. It's not nearly as good as whatever you cancel, because obviously you canceled it for a reason. And more importantly, summon cancel and buffer overflow, which is the app cancel, don't return the costs that were spent. So if someone tries to summon a level 2 Tama that requires a discard or a bunch of energy, and then I summon cancel it, that's eruption, by the way, so that just made it so I can't do anything. All costs have been paid, and they still don't get whatever they use summon cancel for. I can't play this Moai because he requires a discard, so I just have to sit here and take this damage. So like I'm almost certain I'm losing here. Like I can play the Moai to buy a turn, but like I need to specifically draw a revive here. If I draw a revive, I probably still win this, but I don't. I draw native call, also requires a discard, so I have to surrender. Eruption is a wild card to see from a deck this early. And if you're facing lower enemy intelligence, I don't think they ever play that card, even if they are capable, even if they have the energy and it's in their hand, because it's just kind of really brutal for somebody who's just playing casually to face. These decks are pretty good. They're not the greatest versions of what they could be. You can definitely design better versions. But they do show off what that element tries to do pretty well, honestly. So I lose the best of 3 here, but honestly he played Eruption, that's fine. We've been going pretty fast. I've had very few best of 3s that I've lost. This particular run went very well. I had very few setbacks. There's a number of fights here that can go very poorly. I ended with 39 cards here, which, like, you get a blank card in your deck. That's, like, if I had OCD, that would annoy the crap out of me. I do have this for a reason. I will be getting a 40th card very shortly, but I don't have it yet, so I'm sorry if running with 39 cards bothers you. It won't be for very long. It'll be fine. So my opponent's using the draw 4 a whole bunch, because he's killing my stuff. It's another reason to play behind the firewall when you're facing fire decks. They get both energy and shards by killing your stuff. But of course, bit drilling also gets this guy shards. But he gives me more stuff to revive too, so like, I don't have a problem with that. I'll just, you know, kill him with the things he puts in my discard. The next area is the wind area. Wind is interesting because it's a lot more random in terms of like what's strong than a lot of other decks, in that literally their effects have a random element to them. Wind's Tama DNA gives you shards when you gain wind energy, and the major source of wind energy is an app that gives you a wind energy for every wind Tama you have in the field. So they want to have a bunch of their stuff on the field. Unfortunately, their stuff tends to be very easy to kill. Very low toughness. There's ways for them to kind of combo around that, but it's not very reliable, so wind I found is very fragile. The special things that come into play in the wind deck here. Fly is much more prevalent. What Fly does is Tama with Fly will skip all non-flying Tama that aren't the back Tama. They will hit other flying Tama and the back Tama only, and any spillover damage does hit your health. So flying Tama is a way to skip over, a lot of meat shields in the front. They also have the big introduction of things like eggs, which summon a level 1 Tama random from your deck. This is Buffer Overflow. This is the 40th card I'm adding. Buffer Overflow cancels an app or a patch card, but not a virus card, which ends up being important later. It can also cancel other cancels. It's a big reason I want Buffer Overflow in this deck. And 4 copies eventually would be nice. I could have crafted more here, but I have other things I'll need to craft, and I don't want to run out of bits. That would be extremely bad for me. Coming up here, I'm going to use the save point near this boss. This is one of 2 areas where if you lose or surrender, you're not going to be put back at the closest save point, and this game's usually very good about that, but you're going to be put at the save point at the bottom of the area, and I don't want that to happen, so I try to avoid that. The other thing Wind can do is put your cards back into the deck. So instead of me having, this foe out or in discard when it's killed, it gets sent back into my deck. There's a level 3 Tama that's a 10/10 that this Wind deck can randomly bring out if they get lucky. And when it comes out, it takes everything in my field and shoves it back into my deck. That is an instant loss. It is thankfully very rare to see. For whatever reason, this Wind deck isn't playing the... I forgot the name of it. I think it's like wind turbines. It just gives you a wind and an electric energy for every wind Tama you have in play. If it had that card, it would very likely get that 10/10 out more often. They still gain a lot of wind energy. This egg-looking thing, if you leave it alive, hatches into a level 2 Tama. That is a bird Tama specifically. And so we need to kill that so it doesn't do that. And thankfully it's not very likely that anything here lives, because this deck is just... I don't know. There's... even the ways I've found to make wind more powerful combat-wise leaves you with very low HP on the creatures that are doing it, and so they're very easy to kill with almost anything that does direct damage. And so now we have so much on the board, and this guy just dies. He gets not the 10/10, thankfully. Although with the firewall up, I don't think he sends everything into my deck. But I don't remember, and I don't want to find out. So next we're going to go to the bug area. The bug area is where we're going to get our Tama DNA for this deck. It's the Dark Sapling. Dark Sapling cannot gain shards. It has no way to gain shards. In terms of conditional ways, you can give it shards, but it's not going to gain any, naturally. But what it does is give you 1 native energy and 5 life. 5 life instead of 3 life is a huge difference, and it's probably better for us than any conditional shard effect would be, because it keeps us alive in situations where we would otherwise be SOL. The bug area introduces a lot of stuff. It introduces Dark Tama. Dark Tama are Dark Tama are like, it's dark elements, so Dark Native Tama, for example, or Dark Void Tama, Dark Earth Tama. Dark Tama are still of that element, but not for the purposes of evolution. So for example, if you have a level 2 Dark Tama, Dark Native Tama, you can't evolve that over a normal Native Tama. It must evolve over a Dark Native Tama. So Dark decks tend to be separate types of decks, rather than like combining both Dark and non-Dark of the same element. You can find ways to combine them, it's just not done very often, I think, because of that evolution problem can be a real sticky point. It adds these cursed dolls to your field sometimes. If those die, you lose a life, but they're 4/4s, they're pretty good. There's a lot of status effects in the bug area, and there's glyphs. So the bug Tama gives you a shard every time. I'm checking for something that I'm really confused by. I'll talk about that in a moment. The bug Tama gives you, the DNA gives you a shard every time anything is inflicted with a status effect. Dazed, I've talked about a little bit. Anything dazed skips combat. The Tanuki Terrors that do 4 damage, if I summon them, would be dazed, but they aren't when we're reviving them, so they're great. There's Confused, which looks like a question mark. That'll make your Tama hit your side instead of your opponent's side. Yeah, that one's terrible. That one's very annoying to deal with. There's Poison. Poison will do 1 damage whenever a turn ends, and that can be very so slow way to kill something. If it has Protect though, it stays at 0 HP and doesn't die until the end of the round, which is very funny to see, because it's like, oh yeah, Protect even beats Poison, which is wild. That was the use of Glyphs. So glyphs are cards you cannot put in your deck. They are randomly generated through cards that generate glyphs. There are 4 glyphs, and the ones you get are random. And you cannot play more than 1 glyph at once. Like one of the same glyphs. So if you have 2 of the same glyph, you'll have to play them separately. A single glyph makes a golem, which is a 1/1 that'll give you a glyph at the start of the round. 2 glyphs can give you one of, I think, 4 different level 2 Tama. However, in this area, it will always generate the native Protect Tama. 3 glyphs will give you Anubis. Unless Anubis is already on the field. Anubis is a 12/12 that can't be targeted. He's very strong. He also has Ethereal, which I haven't talked about. It was also in the water area. If something's got a faded silhouette, it's ethereal, which means it ignores the first damage it takes in combat. But just once, and then ethereal goes away. If Anubis is already in play and you play 3 glyphs, you generate a failure because he's already there and there's only 1 Anubis, which can be very funny to see. It doesn't happen here very often, but it will happen in the other area with glyphs much more often. If you have all 4 glyphs, and there are only 4 of them, the 4 types of glyphs, so if you play all 4 in a row, you get a 99/99 that breaks Protect and Block. However, if it dies, you instantly lose the game. And it's very funny to be playing an Earth deck and seeing this creature, because Earth has a Hammer and Earthquake, and both of them do make a targeted Tama deal damage to itself. So the 99/99 gets played, and then you hit it with one of these, and it instantly dies, and your opponent loses the game. It's a very funny way to beat the desert boss in particular. I'm going back to the beginning of the game and doing the tutorial. So why am I doing this? Technically, I shouldn't have to. There was a patch that was released a while ago that gave you the Vixee Tama DNA when you beat patch, if you don't do the tutorials. For whatever reason, that's not working for me right now. Other patch effects have been, but that one has not, and so I have to get the Vixee DNA the hard way by doing the tutorials. This is the first time I've experienced this issue, so I'm very proud of how quickly I realized I needed to do this. There's two reasons we need the Vixee DNA. One of them is to have it for a deck that we're going to be making. The other is that we need the Cardi Tama DNA. And Cardi is a Tama that is going to appear basically for free in your list of Tama, but only if you have 3 or more Tama DNA already. So we're going to, after this, kill the sapling and get its DNA. So that would have given us 2, but we need Vixee as the 3rd. And since we need this anyway for a deck, this is far and away the fastest way to get the Tama DNA we need. Now we need to do a best of 3 against Vixel. I notice I still don't have Vixee, and I realize I have to fight her in order to actually get the DNA, which is fine. It's a pretty quick fight. But I used to not have to do this, and it's kind of weird that it's suddenly happening. It's really important that I have the Cardi DNA now, because the deck that will be using that DNA is necessary at the end of the gauntlet I'll be going into basically after this. And the last thing I want to do is get to the end of that gauntlet, realize I don't have Cardi, and then just have to make do with a much slower deck until I can go back and get Cardi. So this is the first win, good, and then the difference between how this deck runs and how her deck before patch runs is wild. Like, this isn't nearly as strong because obviously you aren't expected to have the cards that you do at the end of the area. But it's like the same deck, but one of the biggest differences is she doesn't have the Vixee DNA in play, so she's not gaining shards playing these Tama. And like, you could just see the difference in how many cards she draws. It's a big freaking difference. Okay, so this will give me Vixee. I have enough neutral. I have all of the neutral Tama I need, which is going to be important. There's Vixee, thank goodness. We're gonna do this warp to the forest zone. If you did this warp from Technopolis and you used the exit function, you would go back to the warp. That does not happen for me because this is like on the same layer. So even though I warped there, it's gonna bring me back to the exit, which is kind of sad, but that's okay. I don't really have a way around that. I mean, I could warp to Technopolis and then warp there, but I didn't see that this being something that would happen because I don't normally warp to the forest zone. So I'm going to experience that the hard way here. This fight is, I mean, it's challenging at first, but it's, even compared to the cheater, this is not very difficult. I have more than enough power on the board to easily overcome this. This would be hard for my fire deck, though. So we're then gonna go into Technopolis after this. That's the, and then we're gonna go through the HQ. The machine area is technically the card shop of Technopolis, but we never enter that. But the boss of the Technopolis area is a machine deck. So it's one of the very few machine decks we face. Machine works off of triggered abilities. Its unique Tama gives it 1 shard. It gives you 1 shard every time you use a triggered ability. They have creatures that reset triggers. They do all kinds of things with triggered abilities. They like to spin their wheels a lot. Their terrain even draws you a card every time you play a triggered ability. There's a couple of things in this the boss's machine deck that I'll talk about when I get there. That kind of like, it's one of the decks that's very good for its archetype. But for now, we're facing more Shadow, more Fire decks. These decks start using more Void cards as well. Void is a card type and a deck type that we don't have access to until the very end of the game. In particular, there's a Void card that I think it's dark.asm that when it's deleted, deletes a random Tama on your opponent's board. And it's one of the biggest reasons that the consistency of this revive deck is really helpful, because like I'll constantly have my stuff deleted, but I'm just bringing it back again, so it's free. You haven't seen a lot of Fusion. Fusion was something that was unlocked right after Earth. It's gonna come up soon though. Right after I defeated the Earth boss. Fusion only occurs if you can play more than one of a level 1 Tama, and it has to be the same one from your hand, paying all costs. So like the Thaw here, when I play it, will give me the option of playing the other one to fuse, and I skipped that real fast because I almost never fuse Thaw. When you fuse, you do not get any of the effects of the level 1 Tama you're using, because you are turning them into a level 2 or 3 Tama. If it's 2 of the same Tama, it will become a level 2. You get to see what level 2 it is. It's based on the Tama you use. And if you manage to get 3 of the same Tama in your hand and play them all, paying all costs, you can sometimes get a level 3 Tama, which can be extremely powerful. Fusion isn't always good, because you're making one thing, which is sometimes much easier for your opponent to kill and deal with. But Fusion is a very good way to get a lot of stats on the board, or powerful creatures you otherwise couldn't get, relatively cheaply. So this is the first gauntlet of the game. There's going to be 3 gauntlets, and 2 of them happen almost in a row, honestly. This one is tamer compared to the other ones, but my sense of why the gauntlets exist is like you can kind of get lucky and high roll against almost any deck, but if you face the same like type of deck, the same difficulty multiple times, it's a lot more likely that like you need to have a good enough deck to deal with whatever's being played. And these gauntlets are like are you good enough at deck building to like actually reliably beat these things? And I like the concept to a degree, but like these fights can be grueling. There's just a lot in a row. The good thing about them is they give me a ton of cards, a ton of booster packs from this area. So I'm going to be building a deck that pulls a lot of cards from these areas, from like the 3 zones in this area. And I won't have to grind them at all, because I have to do this anyway, and that gives me a ton of the packs I need. So now we're fighting Y. Y is one of the bosses of the Shadow. Y doesn't play a fire deck. Y plays a bug deck. This modifier gives him a level 2. Anytime you see a level 2, the level 2 is kind of the problem, but it's not really. Those decks, the decks that start with a level 2, tend to be powerful decks in their own right and very specific in like how they work. And This is no exception. Y is not nearly as hard here as he will be later, but like he does play a lot of bugs, and if he can get the bug terrain out, the spider layer terrain, he's going to end up playing most of his deck automatically. What spider layer does is give you a spider web whenever you summon an insectama, and then whenever a spider web dies, it'll hatch into a random insectama from your deck. By random, I do mean random, so if you have level 3s, you can get those level 3s. One fun way to beat Y even here, if you can get him to play Spiderlands, or if you play it yourself, is to have a deck that does other things, and then just stuff it with like 4 to 6 level 3 Spider Tama that you can also discard if they clog up your hand. And then whenever a spider web dies on your side of the board, you would get those level 3 Insectama. That doesn't work as well here because you don't start with a spider web like he does. But if you can get a spider web in any way, it works extremely well when spider web layers in play. The second time you fight Y, you get one automatically, and so it's a lot more powerful there. But you could still make it work here if you get a spider web in play. Or just find a way to summon one level 3 insect, and then you'd be golden, because like they'll keep on giving you level 3 insects, and you can't deal with that. And a lot of the game is like that. The puzzles aren't just, oh, how do I invalidate my opponent? A lot of it can be like, how do I take this thing my opponent's doing and actually make it work better for my deck than it does for theirs. And I love that about this game. There's like nearly 700 cards in this game, and all of them, and not all of them, but a lot of them can be combined in some really surprising ways to really, I don't know, it takes advantage of a lot of different like passive effects and rules in ways that I find very compelling. Unfortunately, this run doesn't really show that off very much, because we kind of just steamroll, and it's faster that way. If I were to do a 100% run, which I am not very interested in doing, I would show off a lot more because some of the optional fights just require you to build decks that work with them in order to be fast, and I would have to farm the cards anyway. The biggest reason I'm not interested in a 100% run is a chicken we ran past. You need to fight the chicken several times in order to get specific cards from its deck. It's the only way to get cards from its deck. And that chicken randomly chooses where to go and always disappears after you fight it. So it is a very annoying grind. And there's a number of other like weird grinds like that would just not be fun to do for 100%. 100% is also a lot. It would have to be every enemy that I've passed and not fought. Like there's just a lot of fights that would happen that would make this so freaking long. But you would see a lot more of like of decks, because if you're doing that many fights, it's a lot more. There's enough of a payoff to justify the deck building cost of making other decks. Here we're going to make a lizard deck. It's going to take me a while because I'm going to open a bunch of packs and fail to find exactly the cards I need. So this deck revolves around a level 2 Windtama called a Seraphir. And I thought for a while that Wind was really strong, but I had this tendency to have a bunch of non-games as Wind, and then like 1 or 2 games that felt unstoppable, and I couldn't figure out why until I realized that the games I was winning were games where I played Seraphir. And I was like, I can't really take advantage of this because Wind's apps that summon a Tama, and here I skipped the Wind packs so I can open them, but I'm missing a lizard, so I'm probably going to load again. And so I was like, well, the apps in Wind that summon a level 2 summon Bird Tama, not Lizard Tama, so I can't get the Seraphir out that way. But I was like, wait a second, like, there is an app that's an Earth app that turns a level 1 Lizard Tama into a level 2 Lizard Tama from your deck. And what if the only level 2 Lizard Tamas in my entire deck were Seraphir? What if I built a Lizard deck? And it turns out this deck is very powerful. Seraphir have a very unique ability. And so they're a 5/5 level 2 Tama, and their ability reads, this Tama attacks once for every opposing Tama on the field. Which means that if your opponent has 6 Tama in play, then the Seraphir will attack 6 times for 5 damage each. And it turns out that this completely obliterates most enemies. There is some downside. In particular, if your opponent has no Tama on the field, the Seraphir is a 5/5 that does nothing. It doesn't even attack, because there's no enemy Tama, so its number of attacks is 0. If you play the Seraphir early, kind of like playing a Moai early, a lot of opponents, if they're like bosses or considered high intelligence, are scripted to not play any Tama. They will just pass through, take maybe 1 hit, and then try to kill your Seraphir. So once I make this deck, there's the Cardi. A lot of my focus is on making sure that I play the Seraphir as late as possible, and that I play other Tama early to pressure my opponent into playing enough Tama to die to Seraphir. I'm looking for something that I don't find, which is Scorched Earth. I'll think it's in the fire area, give up on finding it, and thankfully it's actually in the fairy area, so it'll be fine. But I don't have one thing. After I open this and find Seraphir a couple of times, there's also an upgrade that I need, and that is I'm putting Seraphir in my revive deck, which is really funny. I don't realize this for a second. I do find the other lizard though, and I'm like, wait a second, I know I should have been. Freaking gotta go to the lizard deck. So there's an upgrade that I want for this deck that I don't get now getting the Seraphir, so I have to reopen the wind packs. This upgrade is called Wind Boots. So upgrades are introduced in the machine pack mainly. You see them earlier, but this is where you really start using them. Upgrades, a Tama can hold up to 2 of them, and they modify the Tama in some way. They're like creature enchantments. Wind Boots says this creature attacks first in combat. So it gets first strike, which is really important because one of the downsides of Seraphir is if my opponent has 6 Tama, that tends to be a lot of power going back in my direction. And if we both die at the same time in the same round, then it's a draw and I have to refight, which is very slow. But if I set it up so my Seraphir attacks first, instead it's going to just send a bunch of damage my opponent's way, wiping out pretty much everything they have, and then nothing's going to come back at me. The other upgrade I use is the sword. It invalidates protect, so the attacks break of a creature upgraded with that break protect, which is really important and really powerful. There is a lizard that searches for an upgrade card called a square or squire, and thankfully it's a lizard, so I get to use those and get the upgrades I need. So here's where fusion can happen. I think I fused these 2 minies together into a TNT thing, a pyromine. You can see 6/5 is a heck of a lot of power to put on the board. Unfortunately, that thing dies, but that's fine. I end up drawing cards off of that. One thing to note is similar to when you discard a level 2, if you fuse something, it can't be revived. So that's also like a reason not to do fusing in my revive deck. But I end up doing a very rare revive here with 2 discard creatures, because it ends up giving me just enough damage here to win this round, and I was really proud of that because that was very fast. So this deck revolves around Lizard Tail, which costs 2 energy. The upgrades cost 1 energy. Nothing else costs energy, which is really helpful because like Cardi gives me 1 energy for every different element I have in my starting hand. And so it'll give me a max of 4 energy, which is 2 Lizard Tails. It'll more often give me 3 energy, which is a Lizard Tail and an upgrade. I have exactly 1 Earth Disc in this deck still, I think, that the snakes can search. The snakes search an Earth at. So they'll search Lizard Tail or they'll search this Earth Disc that I have in my deck, which can be really helpful if I, for example, only have 2 energy, or if I have 3 energy and 2 Lizard Tails. It's a way to get me that last energy. There's the Earth Disc that I still have in my deck. So that's helpful. It's also important that it be an Earth Disc because I have Kaboo in my deck, and Kaboo do cost an Earth energy. They give you an Earth energy back when you use them, but they are... if you don't have the Earth energy, they sit in your hand and they're dead. That sucks. You saw my creature die right when I played it. This enemy, Red, has a unique terrain you only see in this battle. And it's the reason I had to switch decks right now. Not only does it work like Scorched Earth, which notably are Scorching Sands, which notably, when the firewall is up, does not affect me. But it also shreds every single card that goes into the discard. Shredding tears a card apart, quote unquote, making it impossible to revive, which means that that terrain effect bricks my entire native deck. So I have to use the Lizard deck anyway. I'm really glad I have every piece I need now. I might do a square fusion here. It is a unique Tama. You only get through this fusion and then you can get more of him. He would normally cost 3 machine energy because he has 3 health and 5 attack, and he attacks twice. He also makes upgrades free, which is less important. I just like the 2 attacks here. I use this fusion quite a bit. It's very good. This machine deck has the machine terrain in play, so it's going to get shards from trigger effects. It's also going to draw cards when it uses trigger effects. Its entire goal is to get Supercomputer. Supercomputer is a card we will thankfully not see from him this game. Supercomputer adds +4/+4 to all machine Tama, and then destroys them at the end of the round. It's a very strong card that I mean, Seraphir can fight against it, but like everything will have 5 toughness, so Seraphir actually won't win the turn that this is used. I don't lose usually, as long as I have the, attack. My guy attacks first upgrade on Seraphir, but it's still not the greatest thing to see. This is an example of my opponent drawing a ton of cards and getting a ton of shards. He already has 10 shards. This is another enemy that's coded not to do direct damage to you unless you're at 1 health. There is a percentage chance that he just does the last damage to you with shards. But thankfully, otherwise, like, he doesn't even use shards at all right now, even though he could heal with them, which would probably be the best thing for him to do. But, like, he's dead anyway, so it doesn't matter. That was very fast. A lot of these fights are going way faster than they normally do. And there are multiple points in my head that I'm like, I am on such a good pace. Most of these fights can go wrong in very predictable and unfortunate ways. Here I'm looking for Scorched Earth. I don't find it. Scorched Earth is a terrain that destroys all terrain for both players and gives you 2 fire energy for each terrain destroyed. It then makes it so neither player can play terrain effects for the rest of the game. Which this Lizard deck doesn't play any terrain, so I'm happy to just have that be a thing. And a lot of the later decks in this game, especially like boss type decks, start with a terrain in play and rely pretty heavily on that terrain to be consistent. So if you start the game by destroying the terrains, you don't just generate. You don't just like brick their deck. You also generate 4 fire energy for the lizard deck, which is great. I want to do that. This is an example of leaving an area and bouncing back to the teleport instead of the exit for the area, which is nice because otherwise it would have taken forever to get back to the teleporter there. I'm glad I didn't try to find Scorched Earth by farming fire. It's not worth it. It saves a lot of time, like consistency wise, but like I don't know if it would have saved enough to justify farming fire there. And thankfully it doesn't matter because I find it in this area. I lost a run once because I forgot that I have to run up here to make this person run into the fairy palace and then get to the card shop. Otherwise they don't appear in the card shop and you cannot progress the run. I felt so dumb when I realized this. I normally fight this first because I used a card in this pack in one of my decks prior. I no longer use that deck, but I'm habitually used to doing this fight first, so I'm going to do this first. This is a 2-part fight. If you lose, they are both best of 3s. If you lose the second one, you have to fight the first one again. So you do not want to lose the second set of fights in particular. Which can be tough because the second set of fights is against a fire fairy deck. And that deck can, if you're not playing something kind of broken, can high roll pretty hard. This is me doing another fusion. This guy lets you discard a card to destroy something, which I'm probably not going to do. But it's nice to have the fusion. One important thing to watch out for if you do fusions like that, and in a deck like this, is like if I had the lizard tail, which I don't, that's why I did the fusion. I can't evolve a level 2 to a level 2. It has to be a level 1 Tama. So I can actually brick my ability to play Seraphir, which can lose me games I would otherwise win. And that can be a problem. So this water fairy deck is not very strong. I've seen it do extremely well. It's just very rare that it does that. So this is just like the calm before the storm because the fire deck is a lot harder. Fairy is a very interesting creature type. There's a lot of fairies. The Ferroslon deck that you get as a reward here, the pack, has a ton of different fairies. You've already seen a ton of different fairies in some of the packs you've opened. The fairies from here on out either work with other fairies or are cheaper if you have cards of a certain element that is not there. So there's a fire fairy, for example, that is cheaper if you have earth elements. So if you have something of an earth element to play. So these fairies are designed to like bridge decks that have 2 or more different elements in them. And they can do some very powerful things. It's hard to get a balanced deck and hard to play a really good fairy deck, but the payoffs are often worth it. We just don't need to do this sort of thing. And honestly, like, this lizard deck is so strong, it's hard to imagine doing anything else. This fairy fire deck just can summon a bunch of quick fire things. It does a lot of stuff on its turn. It uses the Firestone, which is a very interesting card because it's free. And what it does is you pick a fire card in your deck, and it does the HP of that fire card in damage to everything on the field, yours and your opponent's. It also deletes that fire card. That's a very wild free effect. It's an example of a sort of card that you might put in a non-fire deck, just because it's free and it's a board wipe. There's like a lot of flexibility in crossovers. Like even if you aren't really doing crossovers, some cards are just worth reaching out for. That I really like as like a reward for clever deck building. Of course, if you draw that fire card, you can't actually do anything with it. That would be a problem. But if you are using a fire card that has an on-delete effect, because you know the Firestone deletes the card, you could just discard that card and get the on-delete effect if you can't play it. That sounds great. Like, it's just really interesting how rewarding that can be. There's the Firestone. I consistently in this run realized that I don't need to do more than I need to. So playing those 3 guys because my opponent had no cards in hand was all I needed. And I realized that and I took advantage of it, which is nice. So this desert boss is the glyph boss, the major glyph boss. When I used the earth deck to defeat this guy, it took a while. It took like 10 minutes. So I'm happy that this lizard deck has replaced it. This lizard deck works because golems are 1/1s that tend to get played a lot. There is a worry with this deck because 2 glyphs now can make a 5/5 that says Tama cannot evolve. I think it says they can't fuse or evolve. And that's very bad because if that Tama is in play, Lizard Tail doesn't work. So it's really important that unlike every other thing I do, I Lizard Tail early enough here that I don't get locked out by that card. Because I really don't have easy ways to deal with it, so I kind of just have to surrender. This Earth area has Dark Earth Tama, this desert area. Dark Earth is kind of like how Bug had Dark Native mainly, like its own thing. And it is its own deck. It has like a lot of stuff that's specific to it. It has its own terrain. It's an interesting deck. It's not something we dabble with, but I feel like you can definitely use it as a shell to put other stuff into. Because there's a fair bit of power, especially shard-wise, locked into this deck. It's also like what's called a half pack. There's 24 cards instead of 48. So it's a little bit easier to get some of the cards just because there's just like fewer of them overall. Which is nice because we need to get our last lizard from here. And it's called a Tortor. And what a Tortor does is search up a terrain. Not of an element, just any terrain. Which is great because we can search up Scorched Earth. There's the 5/5 I was talking about. Because we can search up Scorched Earth and have another way to get that into our hand to use when we're facing things that rely heavily on terrain. And get more energy that way, which is always nice. So I'm going to open packs and get the Tortor and get the Scorched Earth, realize it's actually in the Fairy pack, which is nice. And then I'm going to finish crafting the Lizard deck and then immediately make another deck. And this will be a shard deck, and this is why I needed Vixee. This is why I needed that starter deck card that was a target. Because we are going to make, I am going to make a neutral Tama deck with Vixee as the core of it. The way Vixee works, and I mentioned this before, is that it gives you a shard every time a neutral Tama is summoned. That includes effects like the target, which is called, I think, target practice, that summons multiple neutral Tama at once. You get 2 shards for the 2 neutral Tama it summons. This is obviously really powerful because you get a lot of shards very quickly, and it's very easy to just fill a deck with neutral Tama and get shards for pretty much everything you play. This is very important going into the electric area because this is the one area outside of one part in Fairy Palace that has enemies that have less than 3 HP. So the first enemy we'll be facing in this area has just 1 HP. They do have a Tama in play that limits you to 1 action per turn. And them as well, but they get free actions because electric. I'll talk about that in a bit. but they only have 1 HP, so if I can get the 5 shards, I can just kill them. And just like avoid having to do whatever the heck else I'd have to do, because all I need to do is just play a bunch of neutral Tama and then kill him. The boss of this area has 2 HP, which requires 10 shards, and it's a very inconsistent, but if I can pull it off, it is extremely quick to kill the boss with shards. The reason it's inconsistent is that dummies, which is most of this deck, do not gain anything in bonus, and lightning likes to have like effects and upgrades that add like 4 to 5 BP to something. So it's possible that I just die. And this can happen multiple times. It is usually relatively quick, but like in particular, the boss has a terrain in play that gives all of its level 1 electric Tama backup. Backup's an ability that says on delete, return it to your hand. And so it's very annoying to kill this electric boss when he plays a bunch of Tama that give him extra actions and do other stuff. Especially when the electric Tama DNA gives you 2 shards every time you gain an extra action. This does require you to gain an extra action. There's some cards that say this card doesn't take a turn action. That does not give you shards. You must in fact gain an extra action. So like, you know, this guy, this Usagi, says you only take 1 action a turn, but because he's an electric deck, he tends to get more than 1 a turn. Electric also has some really interesting things that require a lot of energy. There's I think it's spend 2 energy on a patch to gain an extra action, and then for every copy of that you have in your discard, every copy of that app, or every copy of that patch, the energy cost increases by 1. There's even a Tama that does this, and that gets really interesting. Oh, I Cascade here as much as I can, because Cascade will kill the Tama that's limiting me to 1 action per turn. So it's faster if I Cascade and kill it, because then I can take 2 actions per turn. I missed what I was talking about. I know it was specifically about electric. Oh, this is also the first example of suspend effects. There's an electric Tama here that does a suspend effect. This one right here. Suspend puts a card on the left side with a number. It works like suspend in Magic. Every time a player's turn ends, that counter decreases by 1. And when it hits 0, the effect resolves. We will be going into the ice area next, and that uses a lot more suspend cards and really plays with that mechanic a lot. But there's a suspend card on the left right now. Fusing some of these neutral Tama will give me a dummy lord, which will let me summon 2 dummies with its trigger effect. That's only some Tama though, so I think I run into a situation at least once where I do this incorrectly and don't get that Tama. I've actually dazed his first 2 Tama. Dazing the 2/8 is really important, because otherwise I often will just die here. But yeah, so we're gonna get 10, which is again a very inconsistent thing where I'm going to actually get up to 10 shards twice pretty quickly and just kill this boss. I'm on such a good pace right now, it's kind of wild. After this we'll be fighting our rival again. They're going to have a nature deck that is much stronger. If you don't have a deck that's either really strong or takes advantage of something the nature deck does, like shreds all their cards or something, the nature deck that Riley uses is going to take a lot of time to kill. Nature already is good at putting a lot of HP on the board. Riley is playing 2 level 2 Tama that both sap HP from you. Riley has a lot of protect effects in this deck, which is why I want the Breaks Protect upgrade. And the deck Riley plays is just very reliable at drawing a lot of cards, bringing stuff back from discard. It just keeps a lot of meat on the board consistently. So thankfully Seraphir just ignores everything and just kills Riley, because Riley consistently has a wide board, and that is what Seraphir wants to see. Oh, Prisman is great. I don't often see Prisman, but I'm always happy to have Prisman. When you activate Prisman, he gives you a card and a neutral energy, which is great. I did run into a point here where I had enough shards to kill my opponent, but I waited a turn because I didn't want to do 1 damage to him while he had shards himself. If there is a chance that if my opponent has more than 3 shards, or 3 or more shards, and they are at 1 HP, that they heal. But if they're at max HP, like, you know, their starting HP, they're a lot less likely to heal. And 15 shards is really hard to get with any deck, let alone a neutral deck that can barely survive combat against that earth deck, against that electric deck. So this is a snow area. Snow is really cool. I like the deck a lot. It's just slow. Snow has an effect called Frost. Snow cards with Frost effectively get extra armor. Non-snow cards with Frost don't attack. And if they're in your hand, you can't play them until the Frost wears off. Frost thaws, quote unquote, at the rate of 1 per turn. There is a common card in this pack that removes all frost and gives you a water energy for each frost, which is like an unreal amount of water energy if you're playing against or with a really good frost deck, a really strong one. The boss here uses a terrain that adds frost to all of their Ice Tama and makes their Ice Tama cheaper. So this is the first terrain that we're going to burn away for sure. This is that cactus. This is Riley having a lot of protect already. Thankfully I do have the blade here, and I'm hoping to be able to use it. I did get a Kaboo here, thankfully. You notice I only have 2 energies, so I need to Kaboo here to get that second energy. This means I don't have a way to invalidate protect, but I'm hoping it doesn't matter. Also, only 2 health, and the fact that I need to make Seraphir here worries me. There's a very good chance I tie here, and I think I do. Yep, that's wrong. Snow has a lot more suspend cards. One that is very important no matter what deck you're using, unless you're using a Rainbow Gate deck, is called Absolute Zero. You'll see it a fair bit against the Ice Boss, and it'll be, again, a suspend card that shows up on the left side. Absolute Zero is an example of a suspend card that has effects while suspended, but not when it resolves. So while Absolute Zero, which is a 5-turn suspend card, is suspended, any non-Ice Tama have their BP reduced to 0 when they're summoned. My Revive deck would ignore this, but I don't use it for other reasons. Most notably, the Lizard Tail does summon the Seraphir. So if Absolute Zero is in play, I cannot Lizard Tail. It'll make my Seraphir a 5/0 that never gains BP because it doesn't have a bonus. So a lot of the Snow Boss is either trying to Lizard Tail before Absolute Zero comes out, or having enough plays to kind of spin your wheels until Absolute Zero goes away, so you can Lizard Tail like in that window before combat begins. It's sometimes extremely difficult to get correct. I am so happy throughout my fusion choices. Square is an easy fusion to choose, but like there's a number of times where like I chose to fuse, and it's what wins me the fight. I've tried a couple of runs since then, since this run, and like I just, in addition to some RNG fights being worse for me on average, I often find myself losing time to the choices I made here with fusion, and how right they often were. I also got really lucky with my opponents not having as many cancels and annoying things as they often do, but it was just really notable. So here's me immediately burning the terrain away and gaining no fire energy, because I had one of each type of energy already from the cards I had in my hand, and you can't gain a 5th type of energy, but that's fine, I have 4 energy. This Fimbulwinter that gets played, the 20 turn suspend, it never resolves, so I don't have to talk about it. You would never want that to resolve, unless you have the snow deck, then you love having it resolve. So after this, we're going to be entering the Fairy Castle. You'll notice this is Absolute Zero in play, but like, because the Surfer was already played, it doesn't matter. The Fairy Castle is the first of 2 extremely long gauntlets to end the game. The Fairy Castle is a bunch of guards that have one of 2 broad types of fairy decks. As far as I can tell, which guard has which deck is randomly assigned. So if you're trying to play counter decks, you kind of just need to run into the deck that bricks your deck and then go, oh, I guess this card has this deck. The 2 main types of fairy decks are a more controlling and slow fairy deck that uses a virus card that reduces the energy of the card it targets by 3. So if you play a neutral card and you get hit by that virus, you go from like, you lose 3 neutral energy. That can push your energy into the negative. It's mainly used to counter Rainbow Gate. But it can also just like make a single element deck kind of miserable. The other type of deck is a faster deck that plays a lot of fairies and a lot of bonuses, and uses a card that costs 1 life, but gives every fairy on the board that's yours both protect and immunity. So it's just very, very good at combat. This is another reason to have the Break Protect sword in my deck, because it doesn't matter if I, you know, give my Starfire thing that breaks Protect. It's also relatively likely to still not matter, except for counter damage, just because a lot of those fairies won't have 5 HP or more, so even though they have Protect or Block, even though they don't have Protect, it doesn't matter, because I'm going to do spillover damage over and over on the last thing with Protect until my opponent dies. So this lizard deck is very good for blowing through this area that would usually require 2 separate decks, and you try to figure out which one you need at any given point in time. This is also a maze, but it's the same maze every time. We don't fight every enemy here, we skip as many as possible, but we still have to fight a lot of cards. And these decks are where the game super ramps up. These are full of cancels. They do some really nasty things, like they can steal your Tama for a turn. And that's a really awful effect to be facing. So I do a lot of my plays behind the firewall if I don't have extra Lizard Tama to Lizard Tail. Because like the last thing I want is like to play a big lizard and then have it stolen. And then I'm basically dying to my own lizard, or it like blocks my Seraphir from killing, which would be awful. It's always nice to see a bunch of the sprites in play and then just kill them with Seraphir. This is a pretty rare like non-draw from my opponent. So we have started the big gauntlet. This gauntlet, the first time I played through it in a speed run, took me an hour and a half. Well, this and the next gauntlet. I've cut this down to like 45 minutes, both gauntlets. I'm really proud of how well this lizard deck navigates this gauntlet. I do end up going back to my revive deck in the area after this, because like one problem with this lizard deck is it's so reliant on lizard tail that anything that makes lizard tail not work well can make me very uncomfortable. It's probably possible for me to still win with this deck a lot just by relying on the bonuses and the fusions, but like having a fair bit of my deck not matter, like the snakes don't matter, the Sarahs and the lizard tails don't matter, and the upgrades aren't very good. Like, not enough of my deck is viable in those situations for me to run that deck over the revive deck, which is still vulnerable to cancels, but like against enemies that aren't playing as much fire, I can afford to revive earlier and just rely on the resilience of the deck to power through. So I'm finding Scorched Earth here with the Torador because like this enemy relies on the fairy terrain. In particular, some of his cards require shards to use, so if he doesn't get any shards, he's in extreme trouble. And that's really helpful, especially in something like a best of 3 here, where like if he could get all of this stuff out, it would be tough. He also uses a Spear Trap, which is a very annoying type of card to face if you've never faced it before. It has a patch that will deal 3 damage to a queued Tama, which if it kills that Tama, will prevent its on-summon effects from taking effect. It's very annoying. There's also this Energy Stone, which adds 1 energy of the type, of the element of whatever Tama is summoned, as it's in play. That you summon. If your opponent summons a Tama, it doesn't care. It's a really important engine card that a lot of these decks use. So there, a Spear Trap canceled my fusion by hitting the second Tama. If you're in a situation where you want to fuse and your opponent tries to cancel the first Tama of your fusion, even if you like cancel his cancel, your fusion still can't happen. You're locked to use just the first Tama you summoned. So now we're fighting more guards, and then we're going to be fighting Lan. This is where you start to see some more unique decks. Lan's deck has a lot of stealing effects. Lan's deck is just kind of annoying. It's thankfully a best of 1. It's unusual that it's a best of 1, but that deck can do a lot of silly things to you, so I understand why it's a best of 1. By the way, these fights have been going so fast. Like, this is kind of unreal. I'm not really running into any roadblocks. I'm getting the Seraphir out practically every time. It's doing the things I need to do. I'm not being bricked by Protect. And now we're fighting Lan. Lan again has the fairy terrain. Destroying that quickly is nice. You see immediately a bunch of swaps happened. Things are confused. He'll probably steal this thing too. This is Lan. It's often frustrating. I don't have a lizard tail here either, so I'm pretty sure I end up surrendering. I'm already thinking about it. Now these 2 confused things will hit him instead of me, but like I'm still in a bad situation here, so it's easier for me to just surrender. Thankfully, losing to land puts you out here. There's some times where losing to the guards don't do that, and they put you at the beginning. That thankfully has been fixed, but there's something in the unallocated mast where that happens, and that's kind of sad. But yeah, land again. This is thankfully not going to take nearly as many attempts as it sometimes does. With this deck, it's probably not going to take a lot of attempts anyway. It's just important to play behind the firewall when I can, because he can't steal my things when they're behind the firewall. If you give this guy enough time, there's level 2 versions of that like Moon and Sun Tama that he likes to use that will, when they die, summon level 1 versions that do the swapping, and the Sun ones will create more, the Fire ones will create more fire when they live, and on summon will, sorry I have to stretch, on summon will give you a fire energy. So he generates a lot of energy. He also has the Stone Decree on the left side. This is one of the hardest apps to deal with in the game. While it's suspended, neither player can use app cards. The only cards in the game that interact with suspended cards are also app cards, so it just cancels apps. This is one of 4 fights in a row that happen after land, that they start with this Darkling that can eat a Tama, but they also start with 1 health, and it turns out that I have this shard deck, you know, this deck that I used a little while ago that just gets you 5 shards pretty quickly, and it turns out that I can just get 5 shards and then kill these enemies real fast. This is very satisfying and a very chill way to like transition between a sometimes very random and difficult fight with land to a set of 3 fights that is also very difficult. So it's nice because like casually this took me over an hour, just these 4 enemies. The level 2s are tough, but it's the rest of their deck that's really awful. But it's actually probably the easiest fights in this area because they all only have 1 health, so all I have to do is get 5 shards real fast and then just kill them. And it's so satisfying. Oh my god. And then after these 4 fights, we get into the last fights in this area, and they start with Felicia, who is a demon. Felicia has one of the best decks in the entire game. It is a water fairy deck that can consistently do everything from wiping your entire board and hers, but it's less relevant, to instantly reviving multiple fairies at the start of combat, to going from a board of nothing to a board of 4/4/4 creatures that become 5/5s. She starts with both players having Rainlands terrain, which is one of the things that makes her deck so reliable. But even without it, Felicia's deck is unreal in how quickly and consistently it can put a lot of power on the board and also kind of disrupt your own stuff. I have had multiple casual and run attempts that take 5 to 6 attempts against Felicia alone. Thankfully, if you beat her, and this is a best of 3, you don't have to fight her again even if you lose to the Prince or the Queen. But Felicia is a hell of a fight. And it impresses me how well this deck functions. Oh, she also likes to steal your stuff, of course she does. Because, you know, it's not enough that she be able to do all of her own stuff, she also has to take all of yours. This suspended card will evolve a level 1 Tama into a level 2. If she has no Tama on the field, it still tends to summon a level 2. I think because it puts that the 1/0 is actually a level 1 Tama, so it comes into play and then will turn itself into the level 2. So you notice she's got a 4/4 with Protect and another 4/4 in play, and there's just like a bunch of stuff that happens here. If I didn't destroy Rainlands, this gets even worse, but it is like absolutely wild how well this deck works. It's kind of nice because most of the water decks we've seen up to this point haven't done much of anything, and there haven't been many of them. So to see a water deck that does all of the things, like the fishing rod can get rid of a card that on delete will wipe both boards and stuff like that. Here's her with a 4/4 and a 5/5 already. Like, this can get out of hand so fast. And there's her stealing my Paramine too. After this is the Prince. The Prince has Binary Forest in play already. That's the modifier he has. He has a slower revive deck that uses level 2s and 3s. If he gets his level 3 into play, it's basically over. It unshreds all of his cards and revives, I think, 3 random cards on play. And it revives itself every round at the start of the round. So if he gets that level 3 in play, it's basically over unless his deck's almost already empty. But like the deck itself progresses too slowly for even like my revive deck tends to beat it because it just runs faster. So after the hell that is this Felicia fight, it's kind of nice to face the Prince before you face the Queen. The Queen is another one where removing her terrain like really wipes her out because she's playing Royal Kaintama. Royal Kaintama requires shards to play, broadly speaking. So if you don't let her generate shards, she can't play them. It gets stranded in her hand. The thing to note about the Queen is she has a really mean card called the Security Gate that puts a 5/0 onto your side of the field that has block. Sounds great, except every Tama you have to the right of that Tama can't attack. They just don't attack. So it can, if you don't put stuff out early enough, and she puts that on the left side of your board, you can't do anything until it dies. She's also playing steals, of course, and level 2 Tama that evolve from your Tama instead of hers, which is something straight out of Yu-Gi-Oh! And really annoying to face. Thankfully, because of the shard reliance, her deck is usually very stally. Like it not as in it solves the game, as in it stalls out. It doesn't do as much as it should. Which is nice if you've been running into the Prince high rolling into a bunch of revive stuff and you just want to break. But out of these 3 decks, Felicia is far and away the hardest deck. It is not close. I cannot even describe how flabbergasted I was the first time I faced her deck. But it's nice. Like, we're at the point where not only are the late game nature of these decks really showing themselves, it's showing off what level 6 intelligence really means, where like these enemies are doing everything they can to make their decks sing. And the way they're scripted makes the decks feel very different, which is just a really nice thing to see. So this is what happens in most of the Prince fights. I was doing a bit of math there, where he just dies, which is great. And then we're facing the Queen. There's some story that happens. I haven't talked about the story at all. I mashed through the story. It's hard to talk about the story. But we're going to be going into the unallocated vast after this, because that's where the Shadow come from. The Shadow have been controlling everyone here, etc, etc. This is the first time we see End Hand. End Hand's going to be the reason this run takes so freaking long. But I'll talk about it when I get there. Right now, we're killing the Queen. Once again, if we can get rid of her terrain, it invalidates most of what she does. This terrain is different because like it basically limits both players to 8 or more on the field, or 8 or fewer Tama total on the field. But she gets a lot of Tama, and the last thing I want is for her to clog up the field. So destroying the terrain helps. She has a lot of ways to generate shards. So like these 3 zeros that generate shards, for example. She has a modifier, I think, that gives her a shard every time a royal tama is, or a royal or a fairy tama is summoned. So it's as if she had the Fairylands terrain in play as well, and I can't get rid of it. But like, I still don't want to deal with this boar limiting effect, because Seraphir wants her to have as much as possible in play, and that doesn't work in this situation. That 3/3 that came out is very annoying, and you'll see why. She's at 0, a 3/3 came out, and she's at 1. This is a gold card. Gold cards are very expensive, and only 2 enemies in this game have them, and both of them are fights that like, you just don't expect it. You don't plan around your opponent having a card in their hand that saves their life. I would rather these decks not have these cards. I think it just kind of makes the game feel worse. But I mean, these are, you know, like, some of the ultimate / penultimate fights. I understand why these decks might have, you know, the super strong gold card that makes it so you don't die when you die, but like, it does feel so bad when it's like, okay, I'm going to win unless my opponent has this card that I know makes it so they don't freaking die when they're supposed to die, and then of course they have the card, and then you're like, well, I didn't even think I went anyway, it's fine. So that is the end of the Fairy Kingdom, and we are now going into the final area of the game, which is the unallocated vast. I mean, there's the core and the deeper vast, but it's all part of one area. I switched back to the revive deck here. As I mentioned, the reliability of the deck helps. There is a card that is an ancient card that these card decks use a lot. They also use a lot of viruses. And you see me search for decompile here, and I don't have it, and that's going to hurt me a lot. I should have just seen if the autosave I have here is like that save area I just passed, because that would help a lot. I go with buffer overflow instead, but it doesn't affect viruses. Decompile is a universal cancel. It would have been so good here. The card that, the engine card that most of these decks use is called Memory Card. If you've played Old Magic, it's Time Twister. So it makes both players discard their hand into their discard, and then take their entire discard and shuffle it into their deck. When I'm playing a deck that brings stuff back from discard, this is terrible. It doesn't affect the field, and if I can get enough on the field, I still have more, and there's a chance that when that effect is used, the 5 cards I draw are still good enough, you know, to set up a revive loop anyway. And that's going to be the case more often than not, because, you know, that's what this deck is designed to do. So I'm not necessarily screwed by Memory Card, but it's really worrisome to see. Also the fact that it draws my opponent cards is not fun. So we're going to beat up this enemy, and then the next enemy, and then there's the shadowed after this is the one, and I actually run into this problem where if you surrender against him or he beats you, you get returned to the start of the area instead of the save point directly next to him. It would have been nice to realize this, so I could have just saved there and then loaded the save point. But I do not. This one would return you to the start of the area because there's no save point beforehand. The run back is a little annoying, but like, it's relatively rare that I have issues. I mean, the cancels that these guys have create some problems. There's always a chance that my stuff gets multi-canceled and then it's over, but like, we're really hoping that doesn't happen. There's a lot of null cards here that haven't been in there before. You'll notice that these aren't really fire decks anymore. They're more like null decks. Null decks have some vanishing. They have a lot of virus effects. The card effects here are really interesting. They're also very stally, which is like unfortunate because we're doing a speed run, and we really don't like when our opponents stall things out. And they have the steals, of course they do. I technically should be playing around the steals more, but we do get the Tama back if it doesn't die, so it's not as bad. Oh, another thing about Moai that does not come into play here, but is also very funny to see. Moai have the ability called Anchor, which says that they can't be moved or transferred. If your opponent attempts to steal a Moai, it just sits there. And so it's like really funny, because of course like the one card that already invalidates like every combat also invalidates everything else that would affect it. Moai are basically invulnerable to anything that doesn't like vanish something or just outright delete it. Which is just like, that card is so good. Okay, so that's the save point I should have saved at, because I think I do end up losing to this guy and getting sent back to the beginning. After this guy is your refight with Y. So if you've ever played Super Punch-Out, there's a character named Narcissus Prince. And Narcissus Prince's entire gimmick is that he loves his beautiful face. And he's very calm and very hard to fight until you hit him in the face. And then he gets really mad, and then he just starts throwing punches at you, and he's a lot easier to beat. There's the way Y is scripted feels like Narcissus Prince. He starts with Spider Lair and play in a level 3 spider, and if you don't like either play a ton out on the board, a ton of power out on the board, or burn his Spider Lair, he tends to pass the first turn and play very slow and very calm. And this is so he doesn't deck himself. Like, it's scripted that way because with Spider Lair in play and him already starting with a spider web, he's going to constantly get new spiders. Like, it's just constantly going to summon a bunch of spiders for him. And so he is in high danger of just decking himself with a lot of spiders in play. It's very bad for him to just sit there and do nothing because we have Seraphir, so we need him to play out to the board. So it turns out that in addition to like making his deck much worse, burning his Spider Lair plays perfectly into what we want to do. But again, like, almost every fight we've had here, like, these shadow fights are the first examples of, like, what you normally run into a lot more, which is, like, you constantly, like, have issues somewhere with either what your opponent is doing or what you're able to do with your top deck, etc. And you have to do a lot of refights, or the fights are very slow, or both. The fact that that has happened almost never up to this point is a big reason why what's going to happen at the end of this run is not as devastating as it otherwise would be. So this refight with Y sucks if you don't have a good deck or you don't burn down his Spider Lair. I cannot even remember a normal fight with him that didn't run every card out of their deck. It's so easy for that to happen. But when we burn the Spider Lair, it doesn't matter. Again, this would be the fight because you start with a Spider Web. That having a deck full of level 3 Insectama, or like, you know, just like a little package, would be like super powerful because you would just constantly get one for free. Of course we don't care because we're gonna Seraphir. I get a lot of squares just in case one gets cancelled. Or killed like that. That's a max Toxie ability. Max Toxie, which is on the right side, would be great in my revive deck if it wasn't like a near the end of the game reward. But its ability does damage and poisons, which can easily kill the thing that's summoned, and if it does that, you don't get the unsummon. Kind of like the spear trap I mentioned earlier. I get 2 Seraphirs here, which is going to be an unreal number of attacks, which is exactly what I need to have happen here. Yes, I would like to go to +6, thank you. So after Y comes the red fight. This red fight is the hardest fire deck you'll face. If he can get the firebox in play, it is very likely he's going to summon a level 3 Fire Tama, and as I mentioned, the level 3 Fire Tama are terrifying. This one's an H12 that becomes a 12-12 the first time bonus happens, and it only gets worse from there. I go back to the revive deck to face his fire deck because it's just like, in my experience, a very reliable way to beat him. Which kind of surprises me because like fire is often like you would think the lizard deck would be better here, but if he doesn't get the firebox, his fire deck sometimes just like doesn't play much of its Tama at all and has to sit with a bunch of cards in hand. And it's harder for the Seraphir deck to take advantage of that, while my revive deck can just put enough on the board that it will kill him if he doesn't have a good turn. But like that level, and also it's like if that level 3 comes out and there's not enough Tama to kill it with Seraphir attacks, I'm gonna die to it. I won't be able to deal with that much power and toughness on the board. This fire deck likes to keep a lot of Tama out and does a lot of different things like that. It's just a tough one. Canceling that summon with the summon cancel draws me a card, which is really nice. Because like if it had been summoned, killing it would kill a random Tama of mine, which sucks. Everything he kills with that Incinerate shreds the card, so I can't revive it. This is one fight where that happens more often. He has 4 copies of that in his deck. The discard it requires is not as bad for him. There's the Fire Tama that gets auto-summoned when the Fire Tama dies. He can use it to evolve level 2s. There's a level 3. Oh, it also, you know, because why not, damages you when it comes into play. It can do 4 damage. I think it's 4 damage to, it does the eruption effect, basically, to your Tama. In hand and on the field. Thankfully, I had enough on board to kill it. So I can just make it through red and get past him to end hand. End hand is a 20-minute fight in this run. It is the one stain I have. I practice a lot afterwards, and end hand seems to fall pretty easily to just like an entire deck of level 1 Tama that gain bonuses, because his deck is full of cancels, full of viruses, and full of really nasty effects that interrupt or block what you're doing. So if you just like play a bunch of derpy little creatures that just gain stats, he tends to not be able to cancel everything, and then his creatures, except for like he has some level 2s that are strong, but most of his Tama are just like really small and do not gain much during bonus, so you can like easily just kind of overpower what he has. But if you're playing a combo deck like both of the decks I'm using are, you're going to struggle a lot because he's really good at fighting combo. The other things that come into play here, he has a terrain in play that blocks all direct damage. It's tough to do anyway because he has 5 health. It's probably not worth it, but it's just something to note of him having. The other thing that he has is a card called End Hand. What End Hand does is vanish your entire deck, except for you draw 5 cards and then vanish the rest of your deck. This seems terrible, except for him, it always gives him 30 shards, and his script is hard-coded to spend all consecutive turns spending those shards on damaging you directly. So you can feel like you have the game in the bag, and then he end hands, and then he does damage to you. And unless you have Dark Saply, like I do here, and have 5 health, or it's already in the firewall phase, you will not be able to pass the combat quickly enough to avoid dying to end hand. And that's kind of an awful situation. Like, I have 2 games after I fail multiple times, and you're welcome to skip through this. After I fail multiple times with the nature deck, with the native deck, I have 2 times where I've won 2 out of 3 times with the lizard deck, and then I die to end hand off the top of the deck. I lose so many times to end hand here that I trigger the pity system. So this game does have a pity system if you fight the same guy too many times in a row and keep on losing, where it will slowly decrease their enemy player intelligence. And it's really obvious in this fight because there's a point where he end-hands and then passes. It doesn't matter because I'm at 2 health, but like, he would never do that at 6 intelligence. He always spends all of his available actions hitting you in the face until you die. He ends up like having large hands that he doesn't play any cards with at all, and like his entire deck is very easy to play in response to things or in general. So you noticed I played 2 cards and he canceled them. He's gonna do that again. I'm gonna play 2 incubators, he's gonna cancel them immediately. This is end hand for you. Like this fight normally takes you about 5 minutes, but this 20 minutes is just an unreal amount of time. I tilt pretty freaking hard as we go through this fight, just because like I can't believe that like I have so many times where I'm like 2 out of 3 and then he gets like an end hand, or like he cancels my things and I have nothing on the board. It's so frustrating. He also has the gold Tama, where if he didn't have that in his hand at a couple of points, I win the best of 3. But he does, and so instead of me winning, he just gets a 3/3 in play and he gains a life. And that does end up mattering a couple of times. And so it's just a very frustrating fight in a way that I haven't experienced. And the biggest reason this happens is I don't have Decompile. I'm used to having 4 copies of Decompile here, and I will use them strategically to invalidate whatever stupid virus bullcrap he's doing. Especially the cards that, there's a virus card that returns a card to my hand and then makes it so I can't play that type of card. And it's a very frustrating card to face. So he'll return an app card to my hand, for example, and then I can't play app cards for the rest of the round. Which, you know, for this deck sucks because that means I can't revive. It's better to have a target Tama in a derpy Tama deck because you just play a bunch of Tama and usually like they'll go through eventually. He also has Tama that have a virus effect that shreds all other copies of a card you use. So you get the card you use, but all other copies get shredded. And that's brutal. And his entire deck is actually like designed, if it worked like perfectly in terms of like having more defenses, to shred a bunch of your cards, and then memory card to shuffle all of his stuff back into his deck, but a bunch of the cards that he got from you that were shredded, they aren't shredded, they're vanished, they're just gone. A bunch of the cards that you were using are now vanished, And so your deck is worse, but his deck is the same, and he can just run it over and over until you die. It doesn't work as well because like that would be an absolutely brutal deck to face if we're defensive enough. And so this just has more cancels, which unfortunately just hit me really hard all the time. Here's the cancel that means I can't play apps anymore, which is like really likely to screw me here. And then he makes it so I can't play anything. Oh yeah, it doesn't return it to hand, it destroys it. It does give you 2 shards, which is great. I can use them. He does it here. Thankfully, that's not an app, so I can use Turbo Drive again, which is nice. The one thing Memory Card does is prevent you from playing apps for the rest of the turn. But like, you know, that kind of doesn't matter if like what he's doing is viruses and stuff. So here he's got an 11-11 in play, which is when I'm not drawing anything, it's just going to kill me. Yeah, I'm just going to surrender here. I was going to die anyway to what he has, so there's no reason for me to keep on trying, and it's just brutal. I switched to the lizard deck. It still doesn't end well. 3 health is brutal when you're facing end hand if he end hands at the wrong time. Thankfully, this is near the end of the game, and the 20 minutes I spend here is like that could be free time save, but like I can't easily get through a lot of the other fights in this game without messing up or without the opponent just like destroying me in some way, and that did not happen often at all in this. So this is, I guess, kind of the game's revenge for me getting such good RNG throughout the rest of the game. But like, I was so unhappy in the sense that this cost me a run that was under 230. But, you know, that happens, and my fights against the last enemy, Void-Null, go much better than these fights do. But then again, I've put a lot of thought into making a deck that beat Void-Null. I'm so used to having decompile that I haven't really run into this situation. And I get close with this deck. The problem is 5 health, and then the gold cards, and then what happens with that hand. But like, I get so close multiple times. It is frustrating to see this happen. Also, like, I should have planned around the 6-3. If I play more cards, like if I Lizard Tail again, I can Lizard Tail again here. I win here. And I don't remember if I do that. I do that there, thankfully. I did do the math. But I think there's like at least one time where I don't do that math, and I end up like not killing him. This might be a time where he, yep, there it is, saves his life, gives him life. And it's just like, it's so frustrating. By the way, if he end hands here, I lose. Because he has enough time to kill me. So this 3-3 makes a huge difference. There's 1 huge. That's the fire. 1 huge. 2 huge. In a game I should have won because he was dead. Results in him end handing and killing me. It's so dumb. This game is usually not that unfair. But like, some of the cheaters are pretty freaking unfair, and this guy is designed to be a cheater. The Shadowed are effectively cheaters, and he definitely deserves his role as the biggest asshole. He earns it quite hard. So after this fight is the Void-Null fight, and a lot happens in those fights. There's 3 fights. The first one's the easiest, and I feel like it's like a hustle type of setup where like it's too easy. And you go into the second fight, and the deck gets harder, and then the third fight, the deck gets harder. One thing that's very frustrating about about going into the Void-Null fight is there is sometimes, but not always, a prompt at the start that says, you have beaten this game before, do you want to skip these fights? And if you say yes, it goes straight to credits. I'm not considering that to be part of the run, because it's not consistent. I do not always see that come up. Sometimes it does, but not always. Unfortunately, if I have to beat Void-Null, then if I accidentally hit yes to then skip because I'm mashing, I then see the credits and have to reload from an autosave, and then it gets into this weird bug where you start the second fight for some reason until you surrender again, and it wastes a whole bunch of time. So you're going to see me very slowly progress the dialogue at the start of Void-Null, because I need to make sure that that prompt isn't happening. So the pity system is starting to kick in here, just like because of the way End-Hand is passing instead of damaging me. It doesn't matter, I still end up at 2 health here. Means that if he top decks End-Hand, I lose. He top decked End-Hand, I lose. It's so... So the second fight with Void-Null is going to still be possible with the revive deck, but I'm gonna make one more deck before the end of this. Void-Null has some interesting cards that you don't see anywhere else. He has a card that puts a Wanderer in play every turn. It's a suspend card. Wanderers are 1/1s with no bonus. He has a lot of cards that like are 0/1s or 1/1s that are just there to die. He has a 5/0 that only takes 1 damage from every attack. That one's annoying. It's just there to kind of delay you. But otherwise, he doesn't have a lot. He doesn't have a lot that kills your creatures, and he doesn't have a lot of cancels. So compared to End-Hand, whose deck is like half of those, it's a much easier fight. Until the final fight, which is kind of a puzzle fight. That's quite amusing when we get there. But again, like the fact that he's gotten the gold bird so many times that he had so many cancels early, this End-Hand is absolutely. But that is difficulty 6 for you. They do not pull punches. They draw the cards, they will use them. I think if you play this, if this pity is all the way down to difficulty 1, he won't even play End-Hand if he has it. But here, we don't care about End-Hand because we have 5 health. So I can pass, take 2 damage. But notice how he passed here. Again, pity system. He had 30 shards and could have kept on attacking me. But he didn't because the difficulty is so low that he wouldn't even always attack. And at least, you know, that gets me through, but this could have been so much better. Music's great, at least. And I should not have thought this hard once I realized that Pity had kicked in. I should have just been playing quickly because, like, the game will help you out. You won't stop playing stuff. Like, slower. You know, everything will kind of work in your favor. Once the difficulty is as low as it is. I think too many decks are viable if you play on the low difficulty, which is why I've chosen to do this on difficulty 6. And again, I like the challenge, that definitely helps. He does still sometimes use that effect, which sucks, but that's okay. Because if he doesn't play a Tama, I still hit him a few times. And he plays, like, the baby's Tama, so that's fine. I'll lose one foe, I don't care. It's nice to actually have one of these boards. He doesn't let me have one. I just pass over he'll have these creatures and I'll just kill them. And now we move on to Void-Null, the last fight. I'm grabbing a memory card because why not? I actually put in my deck because, again, why not? Not this deck, the last deck I make. So if you lose any of the Void-Null fights, which are mostly going to be a best of 3, then you can return to that fight, so you don't have to refight the earlier ones, which is nice because I'm going to use a different deck for the last fight than I am for the first 2. So here I am, like, not really mashing, just making sure, is it going to give me the... Okay, so it didn't give me the question, so I can just mash through. The inconsistency here is mapping. So, this fight is easy enough that, like, I'll think for a bit, but I should be able to, like, recognize that, hey, I can just, like, kind of bullcrap my way through this. I am so tilted after end hand that I think it takes me a bit to remember that. But, like, I deserve to be tilted after end hand because that was wild. This is the 5-0 that only takes 1 damage for every minute. That 1-0 actually gives you a card when it dies. 5-0s is annoying, but if I do enough damage, which is like, this is an enemy I can play before Firewall, which is nice because all of my big Tama get +1/+2. So everything doing enough damage here is going to spill damage over, so I actually kill him. And that this is the one that's not best of 3. So now he changes the rules, and he wants your heart. You are now the Tama on the field, and you are a 10/10. And the way this works is at the start of combat, your BP is going to be reduced to whatever your HP is. You also, at the start of every round, move to the back. So the Tama you play behind you are going to be in front of you at the start of the next round, assuming they survive and you survive, which, you know, hopefully you do, because if your character ever dies, you immediately lose. One thing that's very annoying about this fight is that dark.asm, the thing that deletes a random Tama, can target you, and you can just die. So you could be winning, and then randomly chooses you as the thing it kills, and then it's a draw. It's one reason I like playing the revive deck here, especially because it tends to fill the board with a bunch of other possible targets for that roulette. It always feels bad to have that issue. Obviously, it's like, you would have been fine, but nope, randomly it's decided to kill you. So this is again a best of 3, just to make sure you have a deck that's actually doing, you know, what it's supposed to do. It's like pretty reliably puts like shields up, but it doesn't do anything more than that. Not consistent anyway. His third deck is an entirely different situation. I should cancel this, I don't know if I do. But he cancels me, but I cancel him. Cancel words are great. This suspend card is going to put 2 pretty big blockers into play, so hopefully I finish him off before that. He puts up another of those suspend cards. So this is like the longest you can expect it to take, especially the second suspend in play. I know he's gonna get more blockers, so I'm like trying to think of whether I can like get more stuff out. I mean, the BBs that I have at play are doing fine, so it should be fine. I might have considered combining those foe, fusing those foe, because it's a creature that can give plus, I think +2 or +4 to all my Tama. I think it's all native Tama, so maybe it wouldn't have been used if I was like, hey, Buffy, playing. So this is the third fight, which I'm going to surrender through, because my revive deck won't do this. He's got a 99-0. He puts himself on the board. And he's got 99 health, so you have to kill the 99-0 to win. I think you can Rainbow Gate to win as well, but we ain't doing that here. Most notably because if you try to do something that that's not board based, he suddenly has a lot more powerful cards in his deck, and a card called Thousand Swords that'll upgrade every Tama he has in play with a random upgrade. So like he'll just kind of kill Blank. So we're gonna do an upgrade deck that's gonna be focused on a card called Turbo Clock. Turbo Clock costs some machine energy, and it makes the creature you've upgraded attack first, but more importantly, it doubles the bonus they receive. And we're gonna add 4 Acorn and 4 Munching Sapling, all of which increase the HP bonus of their target by 1. So Blank's going to suddenly be doing a whole lot of lifting, and he's going to become the biggest, buffest boy you've ever seen in your life. And he's going to punch everything to death. We are just going to make the biggest boy, and he is going to be wildly powerful. And at this point, Void-Null has nothing that directly attacks Tama. So as long as he's big and buff and huge, he can't actually lose the fight. And that is our goal, is because we can put 2 Turbo Clocks on Blank, he should just be able to destroy everything. The fact that he attacks first means that if something in front of his block, he can't spill over the damage, which is kind of sad when it happens, but that's okay, we'll deal with that. There are 3 sources of machine energy I'm using. I'm using Backup Disc, which adds backup to something. It's a patch, generates machine energy. Wire Cut, which eliminates a Tama with BP 2 or less and gives you a machine energy. And Automato. An Automato is a, or Automato is a, but I like saying it that way, is a machine Tama that has block that, when it's summoned, gives you a machine energy, and then we'll create another Automato if it's still alive at the start of the round. And the biggest issue with that Tama is I have to make sure I don't have too many of them in play, because I want enough room to play squares to find, you know, the other Turbo Clocks or Munching Saplings to boost Blank's HP. Because, like, quadrupling his growth is great, but that's only really great if he's already, like, you know, he's getting +14 now, because he's got so much HP bonus along with the Turbo Clock. Double Turbo Clock is even better, we'll get there. Because then it would be 20 and 28, but he's already at 33, while the Void-Null is only a 46.6. You know, he gains 3 DP per turn without upgrades, and so like we're gonna be much bigger than him because we are the best boy, and we are going to just punch everything to death. It's gonna be super fun. The first time I thought about this deck and actually tried it, I was so giddy, because this fight is so confusing and so frustrating. There's just so much that can happen to Blank here that it turns out that making Blank gain so much HP that he's effectively invulnerable and can kill everything is so satisfying. Like, he's got muscles so big that, like, he just punches the void to death. That's what happens when you decide, oh yeah, we're gonna put you on the board. We're gonna make sure you're the one fighting. And Blake's like, okay, I can do that. there's situations where like I could wire cut this munching sapling, and I'm pretty sure that actually resets its trigger if I did that too. I don't think about doing that because I don't use stuff like that enough, but like it's worth noting that I could do that for the machine energy and to reset the sapling. Instead I backup disk because I forget that you can't play apps after backup disk. It's a thing that I also don't do enough to realize it's a problem. Or not backup disk, but memory card. When you memory card, you can't use apps. It's like I think here I could turbo clock and I think I memory card instead. It ends up, I don't think it ends up also being the game. No, I actually do turbo clock here. So do the proper thing, make sure he gets enough HP. Bonus, he's got double turbo clock, so at +6 +2, it's 24, 24. Because again, it's quadrupled. We have a very buff boy. I run into a weird situation. So I'm really glad I had this execution, because this 5-0 at the front, this building, is taking 0 damage, and I don't know why. You see that I look at it, and it just says on delete all terrains, is all it does. But it literally does not take damage, and I'm still not sure why. But I do have that 4-5 in play that can just delete the dang thing. Or I wire cut it, yeah. Like, I just, like, I didn't know what to do about this thing. And I hadn't seen that happen before, and I still have no idea why it happened. Of course, we do have a boy that is now 65-64. And will soon become, like, over 100 in his stats. So he's learning, he's growing. We're giving him a lot of milk. These saplings are definitely working overtime to give him all the acorns. He's munching away. He's got a lot of protein, and it is working out for Blank, man. Blank is 107, 107. He is just he is now dominating everything. He's got he's gonna become like, I think, a 140 or something at the end of this. It's just so, it's even bigger, 157, 157, and now he finally gets the win. And that is the last fight here. We are done, and credits will roll shortly. This has been my speedrun of Anode Heart Layer Null. Thank you for watching, and again, other than the end hand fight, this went fantastically well, and I'm so happy with how quickly this went.